Welcome back to The Deep Dive. Today, we are really getting into a huge concept that shapes, well, pretty much everything around us: globalization.
That's right. And we're not just talking about it as, trade deals or interconnected economies.
No, we're treating it like the sources do, as a comprehensive international system.
Exactly. And our mission today is to sort of pull apart the architecture of this system. We're leaning heavily on Thomas L. Friedman's big book, The Lexus and the Olive Tree.
Right, that one.
And also the detailed expanded summary packet that goes with it. We're really focusing on the core ideas for this first look: the rules, what drives it, the risks.
And how politics has to adapt, basically.
Yeah, how countries need to survive in this whole new environment.
So if you're listening, our goal here is to give you the map, the operating manual, if you will, for the world right now.
How it limits what governments can do, and maybe why we see some of the political tensions playing out.
We want to get past just defining globalization and really dive into how it works.
Precisely. And Friedman's big idea, which was pretty revolutionary back then, is that the Berlin Wall falling didn't just end the Cold War. It actually replaced the Cold War system with the globalization system.
Okay, that's not just wordplay. That sounds fundamental.
It is. It's like changing the laws of physics for international relations.
Okay, let's unpack that shift then. What really defined the Cold War system, according to Friedman, and what makes globalization so different? It's a whole new system.
Well, the Cold War, it was all about division, wasn't it? You had the two big players, the United States and the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics.
Right, the superpowers.
And the defining thing was nuclear throw weight, the big fear. Nuclear war, annihilation.
And a constant background anxiety.
Definitely. And the structure was walls, camps, sides, the Iron Curtain. It was a world built around nations facing off, balancing power. The main question was always about military strength.
So a kind of scary stability, maybe, with very clear, hard boundaries.
Yeah, you could say that. Now, contrast that with the globalization system. Friedman says this one isn't about division. It's defined by integration.
Integration, how so?
Through overlapping flows, markets flowing into each other, information zipping around, finance moving instantly. It's characterized by speed, sheer velocity, and the defining anxiety. It shifts. It's not nuclear war anymore. It's more like rapid technological disruption, market crashes, feeling left behind.
So the question changes from how big is your missile to
how fast is your modem? Or maybe how plugged in are you? How deeply connected?
That speed, that velocity, it must change everything. You mentioned globalization being a general equilibrium environment. What does that actually mean for, say, a government trying to set a budget?
It means your domestic choices have immediate external consequences. If you're playing in the global game, that is. In the Cold War, maybe you could prop up a failing industry or run big deficits for a while before anyone really noticed or cared financially.
Right, there was lag.
Exactly. But in this general equilibrium world, the reaction is instant. If you signal you're moving away from what investors like, maybe hinting at higher inflation or weakening property rights,
A market reacts immediately.
instantly. Global capital prices that risk right away, and interest rates might jump, borrowing gets more expensive, maybe even before the policy is officially announced.
Wow. So the takeaway here is that nations aren't really fully autonomous in the old sense. They're more like managers constrained by this bigger system.
That's a great way to put it. Globalization is this structure. It has its own logic, and it pressures countries to conform, deviate, and you face pretty swift financial judgment.
Okay. That constraint, that pressure, it leads us right into the core tension Friedman identifies, right? This metaphor, the Lexus and the olive tree. Let's start with the Lexus part. What's that about?
A Lexus, yeah. It stands for modernization, the future, the shiny new thing. It represents that really ancient human drive for material improvement, for getting better stuff faster, more efficiently.
Like technological progress, status.
Yeah, exactly. Status competition, productivity. Friedman talks about visiting the Lexus factory in Japan, all automated, super efficient.
Right, in Toyota City.
That's the one. The Lexus symbolizes the whole global supply chain, high-speed connections, the push for peak economic performance.
So it's the drive for the best, most efficient machine, whether that's a car or a whole economy.
That's it. But, and this is the crucial part, this drive clashes head-on with the olive tree.
Okay, the olive tree, what does that represent?
The olive tree is about roots, belonging, your nation, your tribe, your religion, your local community. It's about finding meaning and identity close to home.
Things that ground you.
Precisely. It represents that deep need for identity, for community, for feeling like you belong somewhere specific. Friedman even brings in, ancient stories like Cain and Abel to show how deep this runs, this need for belonging and the conflicts it can cause.
I see. So it's not just about economics versus tradition, it's deeper.
Much deeper. The olive tree gives you that security of identity, the comfort of local culture and history.
It's a really powerful metaphor because it frames this huge global system in terms of a very human conflict, doesn't it? Wanting the latest tech, the global connection,
A Lexus.
but also desperately needing to hold on to who you are, where you're from.
The olive tree.
Yeah.
And here's the key insight, the real analytical point Friedman makes. For this system of openness to actually last, to be durable, you need what he calls a two-constraint model. The gains from the Lexus, the efficiency, the wealth they have, to be seen as legitimate. They need to be validated by the olive tree, by identity and community acceptance.
So if the benefits of the Lexus feel like they're only going to a few people, or if adapting to it means losing jobs or feeling like your culture is under attack,
Then the olive tree pushes back. Hard.
that's when you see the rise of protectionism, nationalism.
Nativist movements. Exactly. They rise up to defend the local identity, and in doing so, they can erode the very political trust and openness the global system needs to function.
It explains a lot of current politics.
It really does. And Friedman has this personal story, I think it's on page 43, where he's in Jerusalem,
Right.
dealing with all these intense, ancient olive tree issues, security, identity politics. But at the same time, he absolutely needs his laptop fixed, his briefcase repaired.
Things that rely on the global system.
Exactly. Products delivered by the Lexus, the global supply chain. It shows how you're tangled up in the global system, even when you're dealing with the most deeply local, identity-driven concerns. You need both, but they're often pulling in opposite directions.
That dependence on the global system, it's held together by something Friedman calls the global operating system, right?
Yeah.
What actually makes up this OS, and why is it so important?
Okay, the global operating system. Think of it as the underlying code or the rule book that allows deep integration to happen relatively smoothly. It builds trust.
How?
It's this complex layer of shared rules, standards everyone agrees to follow, institutions that enforce them.
Like what specifically?
Things like World Trade Organization, rules on trade barriers, global standards for intellectual property, standardized accounting rules, so everyone's books look comparable.
Makes sense.
Banking regulations like the Basel Accords for stability. It's all the plumbing that lets capital and goods flow predictably across borders. Friedman gives it this slightly tongue-in-cheek name, Dos Capital 6.0.
Ghost Capital 6.0 sounds a bit rigid for a free market.
Well, that's the point. It highlights that this supposedly free system actually runs on a pretty strict mandatory framework.
Yeah.
To play the game, you have to install the software, so to speak.
It sounds less like a free-for-all and more like joining a club with really strict rules.
That's a perfect analogy. It absolutely is. And this leads to a really critical distinction Friedman makes between adoption, absorption, and adaptation.
Okay, break those down. Adoption sounds simple enough.
Adoption's the easy part. That's just signing the treaty, joining the WTO, saying, yes, we'll follow these rules.
Check the box.
Right. Absorption. That's the hard yards. That means actually making the rules stick, having independent courts, regulators who aren't corrupt, the political will to enforce the rules even when powerful domestic groups complain. It means credible, consistent enforcement.
So it's about follow-through and adaptation.
Adaptation is about finding ways to follow the global rules while still respecting local needs and culture the olive tree without completely breaking the system's requirements. It's the customization part.
And what happens if a country just adopts the rules on paper but doesn't really absorb them, doesn't build that credible enforcement?
That's where you get crises. The sources point directly to the Southeast Asian financial crisis in the late 90s as a prime example. These countries had adopted the tech, opened up their capital markets, they looked like they were playing the game, but they hadn't fully absorbed the necessary regulations. Banking oversight was weak, governance wasn't transparent.
So the foundations weren't solid.
Exactly. And when the electronic herd, we'll get to them in a moment, got spooked and started pulling capital out.
It all collapsed.
Instantly. Because the herd relies entirely on trusting that operating system, trusting that the rules are real and enforced. If that trust disappears, the money vanishes at the speed of light. Lack of absorption is incredibly dangerous.
Okay, so the operating system provides the trust, but what actually built this integrated system? What knocked down the Cold War walls? Friedman talks about the three democratizations, right?
Yes, These three huge forces that basically lower the cost and cranked up the speed of doing things globally, they made borders and state control over flows much more porous.
Let's take them one by one. First, the democratization of technology. That seems foundational.
Absolutely. This is largely driven by Moore's law.
Yeah.
Microchips getting exponentially more powerful while getting smaller and cheaper.
Doubling power every 18 months or so.
Right. That dramatic drop in cost, combined with things like fiber optics, satellites, it suddenly made it possible and cheap for companies to manage incredibly complex operations spread all over the globe. Distributed production became feasible.
The cost of coordinating globally just plummeted.
Precisely. Friedman uses this great little story on page 47, the U.S. Treasury Secretary back in '97, making a call on a cell phone in Kenya.
What's the significance of that?
It wasn't just wow technology. It showed how developing nations could suddenly bypass stages of development. They didn't need to spend decades laying copper phone lines across the country.
They could leapfrog straight to mobile connectivity.
Exactly. Leapfrog into the network, making it easier for them to plug into the global system.
And that technological leap directly fuels the second force, the democratization of finance.
Yes. This is about high-speed money. Global capital allocation moving at lightning speed, managed by huge institutional investors, what Friedman calls the electronic herd.
Before this, capital was more locked up locally.
Very much so. Highly localized, often state-controlled or directed. But then you had capital controls removed in many places, financial markets deregulated, and crucially, the tech arrived to move billions instantly across borders.
So pension funds, mutual funds, hedge funds.
They could suddenly shop the entire world for the best return, allocating capital wherever they saw opportunity, almost instantaneously.
Which means a smaller country doesn't necessarily need a big state bank or a powerful patron anymore to get investment. They can appeal directly to this global pool of money.
The barrier to entry for accessing finance dropped dramatically. If your policies look good, if you seem credible according to the rules of the operating system.
The global capital market might fund you.
Might. Which, of course, puts enormous pressure on governments to look credible, to wear that golden straitjacket we'll talk about.
Okay. And the third force, the democratization of information.
This is the rise of 247 global news, the internet, open networks. Information that used to be hidden or slow to spread, government debt figures, environmental problems, regulatory changes.
Now it's everywhere, instantly.
Instantly and globally. This dramatically increases transparency, for better or worse. And it hugely empowers actors who aren't states.
What Friedman calls the super-empowered individual.
Exactly. An activist group, a philanthropist, even a terrorist group can suddenly project influence globally using these networks without needing the resources or backing of a nation state.
Information becomes a source of power in itself.
A massive source. And this democratization of information is key to both the system's dynamism and, as we'll see, its fragility. Speed cuts both ways. Good information travels fast, but so does bad information, disinformation.
Now, Friedman adds a really important caveat here, doesn't he? Despite the word democratization, access to these benefits is far from equal.
Oh, absolutely. This is the crucial flaw, or maybe the inherent tension. These democratizing forces also act as powerful selection mechanisms.
Meaning?
Meaning if governments don't actively invest in supportive policies, things like affordable broadband for everyone, good technical education, basic financial literacy,
then only certain people can really take advantage of these new tools.
Precisely. These democratizations tend to primarily benefit those who are already skilled, already connected, often in urban centers. They can actually accelerate inequality within and between countries, even as the overall global system integrates.
So the potential is there, but it's locked away for many if the enabling conditions aren't met.
Exactly. Without the right infrastructure and human capital, large parts of the population remain shut out from the benefits, only feeling the disruptive side.
That inequality, that feeling of being left out, surely fuels instability, which brings us neatly to the system's main enforcer, the electronic herd. Who exactly are they, and how do they wield this disciplinary power over supposedly sovereign nations?
The electronic herd. It's this vivid metaphor for the collective decentralized intelligence or maybe just reaction of global capital.
So not one entity, but...
It's the sum total, all the portfolio managers, the bond traders, the currency speculators, the big multinational corporations making investment decisions, the hedge funds, the investment banks.
The big money.
The big fast money. They're constantly scanning the horizon globally for signals. Signals about risk, about policy direction, about stability. They are, in effect, the market judges.
And their main tool for judging is pricing risk. How does that actually work financially?
They do it mainly through interest rate spreads, through capital flows, and through the judgments of credit rating agencies.
Okay, spreads first.
The spread is basically the difference between the interest rate a country has to pay to borrow money compared to the rate paid by the safest borrower, like the U.S. government, on its treasury bonds.
So a bigger spread means higher borrowing costs for that country.
Much higher. If the herd smells risk, maybe an unstable election result, a government talking about nationalizing industries, unsustainable debt, they demand a higher return for lending money. That spread widens, sometimes dramatically, almost overnight.
Ouch, and capital flows.
That's the actual movement of money. Selling off a country's bonds, dumping its currency, multinational companies pulling their investments out. It can be a flood or a trickle, but it's constant decentralized decisions happening everywhere, all the time.
So the moment the herd perceives a bad signal according to the rules of the system,
They vote with their feet, or rather with their clicks. They can make borrowing incredibly expensive or even dry up liquidity altogether.
it really is like a decentralized judge constantly delivering verdicts.
An instantaneous one. This forces governments to basically internalize the preferences of these often anonymous global investors. Things like low inflation, balanced budgets, reliable contracts, independent central banks. These become top policy goals.
Often more important than, say, domestic political demands.
Often, yes. That's the constraint in action.
But hang on, if the herd is so focused on immediate signals and instantaneous reactions, doesn't that push governments towards short-term thinking? What about necessary long-term investments in, say, education or infrastructure that won't show a return for years?
That is a huge, huge criticism and a core tension. The sources absolutely acknowledge this. While the herd disciplines genuinely reckless policies, its hyper-reactivity can punish sensible long-term planning.
And it can overreact, presumably?
Massively. It's prone to herd behavior, just like the name suggests. Panic is contagious. A problem in one emerging market, say Thailand back in the 90s, could trigger a wave of selling in a completely different market, like Brazil, not because Brazil had the same problem, but just because investors were panicking and pulling out of anything that looked similar. That's contagion. It can create systemic crises out of localized problems.
Friedman uses the example of Moody's downgrading Canada's debt in 1995. That sounds like a perfect case of the herd's power.
It's a classic. Canada wasn't facing invasion or collapse. But Moody's, one of the big credit rating agencies, acting as a sort of formalized part of the herd's signaling.
Right.
They signaled they didn't like Canada's debt levels, its fiscal trajectory. And that judgment, purely financial, forced the Canadian government to change course, to debate its budget differently, to prioritize getting back in line with what global investors wanted.
All to keep their credit rating up and borrowing costs down?
Exactly. Not because of tanks on the border, but because of bond yields. That's the power of the herd. It can force sovereign governments to adjust policy.
And to keep that herd happy, to attract their investment, states feel compelled to adopt this specific policy package, the Golden Straitjacket.
That's the term Friedman uses, yeah. The Golden Straitjacket is the specific set of economic policies that countries are pushed towards if they want to thrive or even just survive in the globalization system.
What's in this straitjacket?
It's a whole ensemble. Keep government budgets tight, low deficits, fiscal discipline, open up to international trade and capital flows, privatize state-owned companies, deregulate industries, and, crucially, provide really strong protections for investors, especially property rights.
The name itself tells a story, doesn't it? Golden. Because supposedly it leads to growth, attracts investment.
That often correlates with growth, yes.
Yeah.
It's the perceived path to prosperity within the system.
But a straitjacket because...
Because it severely limits your choices. Once you put it on, your political wiggle room shrinks dramatically. You can't easily pursue big state-led industrial projects. You can't maintain highly protected labor markets. You can't run large deficits for social programs without risking that immediate negative judgment from the electronic herd.
From a political economy standpoint, wearing this must radically shift power within a country, right?
Oh, massively. Groups that benefit from openness exporters, companies plugged into global supply chains, the financial sector, they gain enormous influence. They're the ones bringing in the golden rewards.
And who loses out?
Industries that compete with imports, sectors that rely heavily on state subsidies, workers in heavily regulated or unionized industries. They face intense pressure. adapt, become more efficient according to global standards, or shrink, possibly disappear. It creates winners and losers, often quite starkly.
If this straitjacket causes pain, increases inequality, how do democratic governments manage to keep wearing it without facing a massive political backlash? How do they maintain legitimacy?
Legitimacy is absolutely the million-dollar question. The only way democracies seem to be able to sustain this level of openness, according to the analysis, is by actively pursuing compensation and insurance policies alongside the straitjacket. They have to cushion the blows.
So while you're opening up the economy, you simultaneously have to strengthen the social safety net.
Exactly. Robust support for those who lose out. Things like effective job retraining programs, portable pensions, and health benefits that aren't tied to one specific job, unemployment insurance that provides a real cushion. Friedman emphasizes on page 107 that these social shock absorbers are essential. They're what allow people to tolerate the disruption that comes with the Lexus because they feel secure.
The safety net makes the economic straitjacket politically bearable.
That's the theory, yes. Without the net, the political pressure to just take off the straitjacket becomes overwhelming.
Okay, but this system built on speed and integration, it's not just constraining, it's also inherently fragile, isn't it? Friedman has another striking term for this, microchipped immune deficiency. What's that about?
Microchip immune deficiency, or MID. It's a powerful metaphor. Like the human body's immune system can be compromised, Friedman argues. The global system's immune system, its ability to withstand shocks, has been weakened by the very microchips and networks that connect it all.
So the technology that enables globalization also makes it vulnerable.
Precisely. It refers to how quickly problems can spread because of technology. Think cyber attacks bringing down networks, flash crashes in the stock market triggered by algorithms trading faster than humans can react.
Rumors spreading like wildfire online.
Exactly, rumor cascades. And, as we saw with the Asian crisis example, real-time financial contagion, where panic in one place instantly triggers panic elsewhere. The speed magnifies the fragility.
Because everything is so tightly interconnected and moves so fast, the old ways of stopping a crisis don't work as well. The traditional circuit breakers are too slow.
They're often overwhelmed. Policy latency, just the sheer time it takes for a government to figure out what's happening, decide on a response, and implement it becomes incredibly dangerous.
A crisis could be over before policymakers even have their first meeting. Sadly, yes. In high-frequency financial markets, that's literally possible. The sources really hammer home how this speed and contagion could throw countries, as Friedman puts it, back into the third world almost overnight because capital could flee so quickly and completely. The interconnectedness amplifies both gains and losses.
This kind of fragility, the feeling of being exposed to these sudden, uncontrollable shocks, it must feed resentment, right? Which brings us back to the olive tree's revenge.
Absolutely. This is the political backlash. It happens when people feel that globalization is something being done to them, not for them.
An elite project.
Exactly. Run for the benefit of the Lexus global companies, investors, while their own security, their identity, their olive tree is being undermined or ignored. When the economic opening, the Golden Straitjacket stuff, gets way ahead of the safety nets or people's ability to have a political voice,
the system loses its legitimacy.
It feels imposed, unfair. And that creates a political vacuum.
A vacuum that populist leaders are often very good at filling. They step right in. They mobilize people around those powerful emotional identity frames we talked about, our faith, our borders, our language, our national culture, promising to protect the olive tree from these threatening global forces.
And the democratization of information helps them do that.
It turbocharges it. They can use social media, alternative news channels to bypass traditional media and speak directly to people's fears and resentments, often amplifying division. It becomes a real challenge for governance. How do you manage this explosive mix of culture, media, and identity politics?
That clash between global culture and local identity is fascinating. Friedman talks about global brands like McDonald's. They're not just selling burgers, are they?
No, they're exporting norms, tastes, ways of life, cultural scripts. When a global brand like McDonald's opens in, say, India, the example on page 292, it's not just food. It's introducing different ideas about service, speed, maybe even social interaction.
Which can feel exciting to some, but threatening to others.
Exactly. It intensifies the sense of cultural difference, makes identity more salient, more politically charged. So states face this really tough balancing act. Keep the networks open because the Lexus needs them, but somehow trying to manage the information chaos, the potential for foreign interference, the cultural anxieties that openness unleashes.
Shifting from domestic politics to international relations, Friedman came up with a very famous, maybe somewhat controversial idea about trade and conflict, the Golden Arches intuition.
Yes, the McDonald's theory of peace.
Basically, the idea was, what? That countries with McDonald's don't fight each other.
Not quite that absolute, but close. The hypothesis was that once a country develops a middle class big enough to sustain a network of McDonald's, which implies a certain level of economic development and integration into global supply chains, they become much less likely to go to war with other countries that also have McDonald's.
And the logic behind that is purely economic.
Primarily geoeconomic, yes. Deep economic interdependence trade, investment, shared supply chains raises the cost of conflict dramatically. War would disrupt business, hurt profits, destroy investments.
So powerful business groups emerge within both countries that have a strong interest in maintaining peace.
Exactly. They become a constituency lobbying against conflict. The interconnectedness itself becomes a deterrent. A leader thinking about war has to consider the massive economic damage it would inflict on their own countries, exporters, investors, maybe even consumers.
It's a powerful argument for the peace-building effects of economic integration.
It is, and it's useful for thinking about things like sanctions or supply chain vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
But, and this is crucial, the sources stress, it's only a probabilistic theory. It's a tendency, not an iron law.
Because the olive tree can still trump the Lexus.
Precisely. Deep-seated security fears, nationalism, ethnic hatred, status concerns, all those powerful emotional olive tree forces can absolutely override purely rational economic calculations.
What's the key example the reading uses to show the limits of the Golden Arches theory?
The conflict in Kosovo, specifically the North Atlantic Treaty Organization bombing of Yugoslavia in 1999.
Yugoslavia had McDonald's.
Yes. Belgrade, the capital, had McDonald's outlets.
Yeah.
Both sides, in a way, were part of that interconnected world. But the war happened anyway.
Why?
Because the ethnic conflicts, the issues of sovereignty and national identity, the olive tree issues were just too powerful. It showed that leaders and populations are sometimes willing to endure significant economic pain, to sacrifice the Lexus benefits for the sake of those deeper identity or security concerns. The olive tree can demand sacrifice.
Okay, so if this globalization system with all its constraints and tensions is here to stay, then the role of the state has to change fundamentally. It doesn't just manage.
No, not at all. It becomes arguably more important, but its job description changes. It has to shift from being just a traditional sovereign power exercising control to being more like a manager of volatility, credibility, and domestic adaptation.
Friedman outlines 3 key roles for the state in this new era.
Yes, 3 crucial functions: buffer, broker, and signal manager. They're all interconnected.
Let's start with buffer. What does the state need to buffer its citizens from?
From the shocks. The constant turbulence and volatility that come with the system, with the microchip immune deficiency. Jobs are going to be disrupted by technology, by global competition, that's a given.
So the state needs to cushion the fall.
Exactly. It needs to act like an insurer. This means investing heavily in what economists call active labor market policies. High-quality retraining programs so people can adapt to new jobs. Benefits like healthcare and pensions that aren't lost when you lose a specific job, portability is key. And unemployment insurance that actually provides a meaningful safety net.
Friedman argues this isn't just nice to have, it's essential for political stability.
Absolutely essential. If people feel completely exposed to every economic shock, they'll eventually reject the whole system of openness that causes the shocks. The buffer makes the system politically sustainable.
If the state doesn't provide the safety net, people won't be willing to take the economic risks, the leaps that the system demands.
You got it. That's the buffer role. Then there's the broker role.
Brokering what, exactly? Deals.
Deals, partnerships, collaboration. The state needs to act as a convener, bringing different groups together, companies, unions, local governments, universities, to figure out how to adapt together.
So it's not dictating solutions from the top down.
No, it's not old-school central planning. It's more about facilitating cooperation, helping regions or industries that are struggling to find new competitive niches, sharing the costs of adjustment, co-investing in things like research or infrastructure. It's managing the internal response to external pressures.
Okay. Buffer, broker. And the third one sounds crucial, especially given our discussion about the electronic herd, signal manager.
This might be the toughest one. It's all about maintaining credibility, primarily with those global markets, the herd.
How does a state manage signals effectively?
By being predictable, transparent, and consistent. Sending clear signals that it's committed to the core rules of the Golden Straitjacket, Low inflation, fiscal responsibility, respecting contracts, maintaining regulatory quality, publishing reliable data.
Because the herd hates surprises.
Hates them. Predictability and credibility are rewarded with lower borrowing costs and stable investment. Erratic policy, lack of transparency, signs of political instability, those send bad signals, and the herd reacts negatively, quickly. As the sources stress, a stable, credible policy environment is vital for keeping capital flowing in, or at least not flowing out.
But here's the massive tension, isn't it? The state needs to be a good buffer, providing those expensive social safety nets.
Right, which costs money.
But it also needs to be a good signal manager, adhering to the Golden Straitjacket, which demands low taxes, balanced budgets, and staying competitive in a world where capital can just leave if costs get too high. How on earth does a government square that circle?
That is the central political nightmare of globalization. It's an incredibly difficult balancing act.
You're caught between global pressures pushing taxes down, especially on mobile capital and corporations.
Because they can just move elsewhere, the Lexus drive for efficiency.
And domestic pressures demanding more spending on the buffer role, on social programs to maintain legitimacy and cushion the olive tree.
Exactly. If you can't effectively tax capital because it's too mobile, you might have to rely more on taxes on labor or consumption taxes.
Which can hit ordinary working people harder, potentially making them feel more alienated, feeding the olive tree's revenge even more.
It risks creating a really vicious cycle. The states that manage this successfully are the ones that somehow find that sweet spot, funding the necessary social cohesion without killing the economic competitiveness that generates the wealth in the first place. It requires incredibly smart, credible, and agile governance.
Which brings us towards the end goal Friedman proposes. How do we make this whole system not just functional, but sustainable and, well, more humane? He talks about civilizing globalization.
Right. And he uses another great metaphor here near the end of the book on page 444, the trapeze metaphor.
Okay, how does that work?
He says that for societies to embrace the risks of openness, the daring leaps of the free market, the Lexus, they need a strong safety net underneath them. The trapeze artist is only willing to try the dangerous triple flip if they know there's a sturdy net below.
So the net represents the social safety nets, the buffer function, the olive tree's need for security.
Exactly. The net provides the confidence to take the leap. Openness requires careful legitimacy engineering, as he puts it. You have to build the net to make the leap possible over the long run.
The ultimate goal, then, is a symbiosis. Not choosing Lexus or olive tree, but finding a way for them to coexist.
That's the ideal. The Lexus needs to run with the olive tree, not run over it. Civilizing globalization means spreading the gains more broadly, finding ways to respect different identities and cultures within this integrated system, and building in resilience those shock absorbers so that when the inevitable volatility hits, it doesn't completely derail the whole project politically.
Making the system robust enough and fair enough that people continue to consent to it.
Without that legitimacy, built on both efficiency and security, the system eventually breaks down.
Wow. Okay, that was genuinely a deep dive into Friedman's framework.
Yeah.
Let's try and quickly nail down the absolute core takeaways for anyone listening.
First, globalization isn't just a trend. It's an integrated system with rules the operating system that constrain states.
Got it. Second, the central tension is balancing the drive for efficiency and modernization, the Lexus, with the fundamental human need for identity, roots, and security, the olive tree. Success means managing that balance.
Third, the system's speed and integration make it inherently fragile, the microchip immune deficiency. So building in resilience, buffers, safety nets is not optional, it's critical for stability.
And fourth, the state's job changes completely. It has to become an effective buffer, broker, and especially signal manager, navigating the tough constraints of the Golden Straitjacket while trying to maintain domestic political support.
Those are the big ones, I think.
Now, looking forward, the sources kind of leave us hanging with a really provocative final thought. Maybe something for you, the listener, to chew on.
Yeah, it's this timing mismatch.
Yeah.
We established that the electronic herd demands rational, consistent, long-term credibility from governments acting as signal managers. They react instantly to information.
Right. Calm, predictable signals are rewarded.
But we also see that domestic politics, increasingly, are driven by these super fast, emotional, identity-based backlashes, the olive tree's revenge, fueled by social media, amplified by that democratization of information.
So you have instantaneous global finance demanding cool rationality, colliding with instantaneous domestic politics driven by hot emotion and identity.
Exactly. Can any government realistically maintain the long-term rational credibility of the herd demands if its own political environment is constantly being churned by these rapid-fire, identity-fueled mobilizations? It's like trying to steer a steady course in a hurricane driven by tweets.
The speed of the olive tree's reaction, amplified by tech, might make the signal manager role almost impossible over the long term.
That's the troubling question. Is there a fundamental incompatibility between the speed and demands of the global financial system and the speed and nature of modern identity politics? Finding a way to bridge that timing gap, that emotional gap, that might be the central challenge for governance in the globalization era.
A fascinating and maybe slightly worrying thought to end on. Thank you so much for walking us through that complex architecture.
My pleasure. Hopefully it gives everyone a clearer framework for understanding the world we're navigating.